Tonight in our On the Record discussion, we're asking if South Africa has become or still is a safe haven for international gangsters. It's often said that law enforcement in South Africa is to at least some extent captured, doing the bidding perhaps of political figures and also crime bosses in the underworld. So how bad is it? Well, for decades, Mandy Weiner has tracked the relationships between career criminals and rotten cops. In Killing Kebble, she wrote about the murder of Brett Kebble and an assisted suicide in 2005, and the trial of South Africa's most senior cop, Jackie Selebi, who was convicted of corruption in 2010. More recently, she's written Ministry of Crime, which explores the underworld and the life and times primarily of Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir and his network operating out of Bedfordview. Author and News24 investigative journalist Mandy Weiner joining us now. So does certified fraud examiner O Sullivan, who in Weiner's book is referred to as the dirty cop catcher. He has been involved in several cases, providing evidence that assisted the prosecution of Selebi and Krejcir. All right, starting with you, Mandy, thank you both for being here. You've discussed so much in Ministry of Crime. Before we focus on Radovan Krejcir, because I want to look at sort of where the underworld was and where it is now. Before we look at Krejcir, explain how he sort of entered South Africa and maybe it was a fertile territory because of what had happened previously with Selebi, the fallout between the Scorpions and police. So take us back.
So Radovan Krejcir arrived in South Africa in 2007, and he was literally wearing a disguise, and he had a pseudonym of Jules Egbert Savvy. And when he arrived here, he was arrested on an Interpol red notice. But you have to remember what the circumstances were at the time. It was just then that Glenn Agliotti had been arrested for the murder of Brett Kebble, and he was giving the Scorpions all of this information about how he had corrupted the National Police Commissioner. And there were these stories coming out about how Selebi had been bribed, and these envelopes stuffed with cash, and these shopping sprees. And Glenn Agliotti would get off, and the Kebble killers would also then get off. So Krejcir would have looked at this and gone, well, here's a National Police Commissioner that's being corrupted. It doesn't look as though much is happening to the people responsible for doing that corrupting, and it is ripe for the pickings. And I once asked Krejcir outside court, I said, why did you come to South Africa? And he said somewhat tongue-in-cheek, because of your incredible criminal justice system. And when he's referring to that, he's referring to what I call the Ministry of Crime, and it's that relationship between organised crime, the police and politicians in South Africa.
So that's not great for South Africa and our reputation. Paul, some would say that you're a crusader of sorts. You were involved in Selebi. You had a personal history with him, but then a lot of other cases, I presume, I don't know, but for no paying clients. Are you a crusader, and why?
No, I think there's some dirty lawyers that often refer to me as a Cape Crusader, and that I take the law into my own hands, but I have skills, and I deploy those skills to make South Africa a better country. I mean, we talk about Radovan Krejcir, you know, my fight against him lasted for 7 years. Now, Mandy alluded to the statement he made outside the court, in fact, after he was released on bail. We subsequently established that bribes had been paid for him to be released, and he said he liked South Africa, so it had a very good justice system, and we interpreted that in a particular way. And curiously, when he was sentenced to 35 years, he lambasted the justice system of South Africa. So I think eventually, with a bit of hard work by certain clean cops, because I identified all the dirty cops on his payroll and we went for them, Radovan Krejcir got his just desserts, and it's not over yet. He's going to get a lot more sentencing before it's finished.
Yeah, so he's currently complaining about beds and food in prison. He is serving time. So let's continue the timeline. He lands in 2007. There's an Interpol notice out. Tell us some of the mythology around him, given his time in Prague and then the Seychelles.
Yeah. So I always said that Radovan Krejcir had mastered the art of state capture before we even really knew what state capture was about, because he had done this in the Czech Republic, and then he went to the Seychelles and he befriended the son of the president there, and then when it became too heated, he came to South Africa. And what he was able to do was really capture the police force, and he really corrupted it at every level. So from station level, where he would give members of the Bedfordview police station money to go buy lunch, to generals. So there were allegations that the head of crime intelligence in Gauteng was on his payroll, that the head of the Hawks, that the head of the crime intelligence in the country, the most senior detective in the country, were all on his payroll. And for a period of 3 to 4 years, there were literally bodies piling up in the underworld, and there were all of these allegations. So perhaps it was tenuous that he was linked to all of them, but his name always popped up, and for some reason the police could never do anything against him. They could never convict him of anything. There was an insurance fraud charge that disappeared, which Paul can tell you a lot more about as well. There were allegations against him for armed robbery, and in the end it was actually the SARS so-called rogue unit that is now no longer in existence that Al Capone'd Radovan Krejcir. That's how they got him in the end, because of that rogue unit and not the police.
That's very interesting. And you write about a witness, Jacob Nair, I think that's how you say it, who was under your sort of protection, Paul. So you felt like that was the only way to keep him alive and able to testify.
Yeah, dirty cops. In fact, the head of the, at that stage, the Divisional Commissioner for Detective Service in the country, and the now Chief of Police, Kekla Sitoli, they took a decision that he would be released from the witness protection that he was getting from the police, and they dumped him with his suitcase on my doorstep. So I then took him, if you like, under my wing, and I placed him in a position where he was safe. And eventually I flew him out of the country, because I realized that protecting him in South Africa was just becoming too cumbersome.
Did Krejcir break the police force by offering everybody all and sundry bribes, or did he come into this very fertile environment where we could even say maybe it was broken before?
I think it was broken for a long time. You've got to remember the leadership of the police after Fivers was corrupt. So you had 9.5 years with Jackie Selebi running the police force, and if you have somebody at the top that's corrupt, you inculcate a sense of corruption instead of leadership, and you have a situation where, shall we say, the conditions were right, and they were certainly right for Radovan Krejcir. He had the head of crime intelligence in Gauteng. The wife of that person was in business with Krejcir's wife. Bags of money were being handed over. I met with the head of crime intelligence, and I gave him a secret dossier which Krejcir had the same day. So, you know, I think I've made the statement. In fact, Forensics for Justice, we published on our website in December 2016, and we republished it with more information in June last year, a report that we call Joining the Dots, which sets out how the criminal justice system has been captured by the underworld.
So tell us more, because you look at Krejcir and then George Luca, who sort of helped him get into the local underworld. They argue over who killed Lolly Jackson, that most South Africans remember. And then there's this cop, General Joey Mabasa, sort of in the background there. People speculated that he was involved. So you've looked at that relationship, that very murky relationship.
Yeah. So what happened was there's such a close proximity between organised crime and the police, and that blue line gets thinner and thinner. So what you've got often is the so-called bad guys working for the good guys, because so many of these underworld characters are actually police sources, or they are paid agents. They provide information, which means that they are never actually prosecuted because the cops protect them. And then you've got so many senior police officers who are on the payroll of organised crime. And you've got this kind of transition between the underworld and the upper world, and you're not sure who's good and who's bad. And Radovan Krejcir gets a lot of publicity, and that's what happened, is that he had good PR. But there are lots of other Krejcirs out there that you don't necessarily hear about. And we always hear about Krejcir in the media and how he corrupted the police. But what we don't hear about is how many other mini Krejcirs or even people who are bigger organised crime bosses than him that have managed to corrupt the police. They just don't necessarily have the fancy cars and the mansion on Kloof Road and the interviews on carte blanche in the media. They're just keeping a low profile, but they've still managed to corrupt the police.
So in the second half of this, we'll look at where we are now, and I want to hear about those. But Paul, there's that discussion of a meeting with you, I think Robert McBride, Major General Shadrach Sibia, Jacob Nair, who we were talking about, and then you were accused of treason after that. I remember concern about your passport at the airport. Seemingly targeted. Do you feel safe right now?
Oh, yeah, I'm perfectly safe. I believe in God, and if you're on the side of right, I think in 2010 or 2011, I was doing a TV interview in Prague, in the Czech Republic, and the interviewer asked me, "Are you afraid of Radovan Krejcir?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm more afraid of my wife." So I think he phoned me afterwards and explained to me what he wanted me to do to him before he killed me. So I think if you look them straight in the face and you show that you're not afraid, then you win, and I've won.
And what about the police, very quickly?
I think 90% or more of the police are hard-working, decent people, and they've got, for a large part, of corrupt management, and it's the corrupt management that I've been focusing on. And I can tell you, the managers that are not corrupt, and we're talking about people at the rank of brigadier and general, they are delighted with what I've been doing, because it's tarnished their jobs, it's tarnished their image, and they're happy to see us taking these people down.
All right, so thank you. Stay with us. In the second half of this, we'll take a short break and we'll look at where we are as South Africa now in terms of these shady gangsters operating in the underworld, and how are we doing in terms of law enforcement to combat it. Stay with us.
Hanover Park is known to be a playground for gang members. Several pupils failed to attend classes due to gang shootings.
The impact of these gang wars is that we find that learners stay away from school.
There's a lot of disruptions, but yet I try to come every day to school so that I can have a better future.
As an education department, which is not our primary mandate to address crime, we do what we can to ensure that our learners and teachers are safe in schools.
In pursuit of good results for a better future, these learners have all come here to what is commonly known as study camps. They bath, eat and sleep here. Learners believe that their sacrifices will bear fruit.
Once we give the best of our results and we get enough chance to spend with our teachers.
The local business people are giving us food, are supporting us big time.
This year we must have 100%.
All right, we continue our discussion about the underworld with News24 Investigative Journalist and author Mandy Weiner, the author of Ministry of Crime, and in her book she speaks about Paul O Sullivan as the dirty cop catcher. He is a certified fraud examiner. So let's wrap up Radovan Krejcir, who was the focus and for many South Africans represented sort of that international gangster coming in and sort of taking charge of the underworld. You say you don't want him extradited to the Czech Republic.
No, and I'll make sure he's not extradited.
Why?
To the Czech Republic. Because, remember, I've been investigating this man since 2010 or 2009. So it's now almost 10 years. And I've got a lot of evidence as to what his conduct was while he was here. Mandy's book would have needed a couple of 1,000 pages to pack it all in. So what she had to do was pick the right bits for the book. But for example, he was sending people from South Africa to the Czech Republic to murder people in the Czech Republic, to settle scores. And he was being contracted while he was in South Africa by people in Portugal to kill people in South Africa that some Portuguese gangster wanted to settle scores with. He sent people to the Seychelles to kill people in the Seychelles. So, in my opinion, the best place for Radovan Krejcir is Kokstad prison, where he can spend the rest of his life, because he's still got a few more sentences to come. And I've worked out that he's going to, at the end of the day, when you add all the and they will be consecutive, not concurrent, he's going to sit for 100 years. And Kokstad prison, good security, well-run prison, and cell phones don't work because they've got systems to block it. So he won't be able to arrange for any more murders while he was in prison.
Are you sure about this? Because you got a call from him, I think, from a cell phone. From a cell.
While he was in prison, he tried to arrange for my murder no fewer than 4 times. So I'll be very happy when he's parked in Kokstad. His wife and his children, his mother, they'll never see him again because there's warrants for them. So if they fly into South Africa, that'll be the last trip they make.
So you spoke about the bodies piling up, but maybe we're focusing only on Radovan Krejcir. Yeah. Have those bodies stopped piling up now that he's behind bars?
Well, it's hard to say. So there have been a series of underworld hits that have happened both in Joburg and Cape Town, which I don't believe are linked to him. So in Joburg over the past few months, we've had a number of assassinations that have occurred relating to the Serbian organised crime networks. So there have been around 3 incidents where we've had Serbians who have links to paramilitary organizations that they've been in South Africa for who knows how long, and they've been taken out in hits, in traffic, in daytime while they were sitting in their cars. Men on motorbikes have pulled up and opened fire and killed them, and no one's been arrested for these. So this has been happening. There is some suggestion that it is kind of a relic of the Krejcir era. So many of them were maybe associated with him, and then a new network came in and have pushed them out. So there could be some legacy over there. And then in Cape Town, of course, we've had this turf war that's been going on between an older faction, a more established faction in nightclub security, and a newer faction. And the most prominent of those hits would have been Pete Mahalik, the attorney that was, the advocate, sorry, that was killed recently while dropping off his children on the Atlantic seaboard. So that's going on in Cape Town at the moment. And there is a suggestion also that is what we're seeing today is a result of what happened to Cyril Bierke, who was a close ally of Radovan Krejcir when he was killed in 2011, and the plates have been shifting, and now we're seeing in Cape Town today the result of that.
Because you did try and fast forward to Nafiz Modak, so kind of following where the underworld is now at the end of your book. So you're saying we can't really tell at this stage.
Yes, so in Cape Town, Nafiz Modak is kind of the new guy on the block, and it's believed that he is heading this new faction that is trying to take over nightclub security, and he has been arrested and his trial is ongoing, his trial of extortion. And the allegation is that he and his associates have been going into nightclubs and businesses in Cape Town and extorting people, basically saying, pay us 20-30 grand, and if you don't, then we will terrorize your patrons. He, of course, denies it. He believes that there are dirty cops that are being run by Mark Liffman, the Sea Point businessman, and they are both accusing each other of using different police officers against them. So that's all happening in Cape Town at the moment, and it's unclear whether or not that is linked to all these hits that have been happening in Joburg linked to the Serbians.
Extraordinary. So Paul, if you are a Batman of sorts, which you're not, but if you were, do you feel like there's more or less need for somebody like you who will try and find corruption wherever it may be?
No, I think if South Africa had a criminal justice system that was functioning, and bearing in mind I don't get paid for the work I do, I do it free of charge, I do it as a commitment to society. But if the criminal justice system was functioning, if it wasn't politicized and had been captured by the underworld, there'd be absolutely no need for people like me. The thing is, I'm not prepared to stand back and watch this country being run down the tubes by a bunch of thugs. I'm prepared to stand up and do what it takes to put these people behind bars. You talk about Cape Town. I heard a story this very morning, about a person who runs a reasonable, high-quality premises in Cape Town where people can go and have a meal and drink, and occasionally they have some live music. And these thugs came along one day, 4 or 5 cars pulled up, and all these people got out with guns and whatnot, and went inside and spoke to the owner and said, "Hi, we're going to make sure there's no more crime in this area. And by the way, you'll keep the same security guards and everything, but this is the new bank details. This is where you'll be paying your money from now on." What kind of contracting arrangement is that? I said to the guy, he must have read Section 197 of the Labour Relations Act, because that's a very strange
how
setup.
That works to 5 armed men. Well,
Yeah.
you said, you were quoted by Mandy in the book, saying that crime intelligence has since the days of Selebi been a tool of the underworld. Nothing has changed. You say they even provide intelligence for the underworld hitmen.
Correct.
So I'm trying to gauge, because earlier you said we have good cops, do you know what I mean, 90%, but are things getting better or worse in terms of that?
I think the criminal justice system is still captured. I made the comment the other day that Godfrey Labia, who's a very capable policeman, is now in charge of the Hawks, but he's not in control of the Hawks. So you have this situation where whoever's in charge have to take control. There has to be command and control, and there's a lot of cleaning up to do. You have to remember, under Selebi, in the 9 years that Selebi was running the police, literally hundreds of people were given senior appointments. The same happened under Paklani. The same happened under Nklemeza. So you have a criminal, and of course Sean Abrahams did the same to the National Prosecuting Authority. So you have a criminal justice system that's broken, and it has to be fixed. And only after it's fixed can we get on top of the crime. And I mean, I sat and worked out last week that just with commercial crime, with large-scale frauds, with the resources that are available and the corruption that's been taking place in the last 5 years, it will take 27 years with the resources available to investigate the backlog of cases. What does that mean? Does that mean you stop and draw a line in the sand and let everybody else off? No, you have to deal with these cases.
What do you think? I mean, your experience has put you sort of close to those people who are meant to be fighting for us, for our security. What's your sense?
So it's important to understand when Paul talks about joining the dots. So what happened over the past decade or so? There's been this malicious, deliberate campaign to push out good civil servants and put in more malleable officials in their place. So at every law enforcement agency in the country, from SARS to state security to the Hawks, crime intelligence, IPID, this is what happened. We saw good people being suspended, and we saw these agencies being captured for not necessarily political purposes, but also for criminal purposes. So since Cyril Ramaphosa has come in as president, we have been seeing the new broom sweeping clean. So for example, Tom Moyane is now gone at SARS, Sean Abrahams has gone at the NPA, we're seeing Godfrey Labia at Hawks and Peter Jacobs at Crime Intelligence. So at least that is happening, and I'm encouraged by that. However, the law enforcement agencies have been eviscerated. There is so much capacity that has gone to the private sector. There's no longer a chartered accountant working at the Hawks, and they have to go and investigate Steinhoff and Marcus Jooste. It's very difficult if they haven't got the capacity, if it's all sitting in auditing firms, which have their own problems at the moment, for any kind of law enforcement agency to fight organised crime. And that's the problem that we're seeing at the moment, is there is just not the capacity and the skills sitting within the state to actually fight organised crime.
And we're still seeing that overlag, aren't we? I mean, the spy tapes came out of that old rivalry between law enforcement, still being used, and the prosecution of Jacob Zuma still goes on. So these historical things still sort of impact on prosecutions today.
That's right, and you can't forget the Richard Mdluli years. So for 8 years, Richard Mdluli was on suspension while he was still the head of crime intelligence, and he was paid 12 million rand, including a performance bonus, while sitting at home. And over that 8 years, crime intelligence was not doing any intelligence work. There was so much political infighting that they were all spying on each other, and there was malfeasance and there was fraud and corruption that was going on. So the organisation needs to recover, and it's going to take a long time to recover. It doesn't happen overnight. We need to get people back into the police service. We need to get, if you're finishing an LLB, do you go and do your articles at a Sanson law firm, or do you join the States and become a prosecutor? And that's the only way you're going to change the capacity, if you change the mindsets of people and the perception of these organizations.
All right, let's end with that. Paul, last word to you.
I just think the comment about crime intelligence, I'll give you a classic example. So when Radovan Krejcir is in prison, he wants to get me killed. He's brought a bail application and he arranges to have me killed before he's released on bail so that he can't be accused of it. And in order to track where I am, police officials in crime intelligence are pinging my phone and then sending a picture of a map to show where I am. Of course, what they didn't realize was we knew it was going on, and I'd left my phone at a certain location and I was somewhere else. But when you've got that level of criminality in the police, the good news is this woman is in jail. She's waiting for trial.
We're running out of time, so my final question is how long to clean it up?
I think it's going to take at least a decade to clean up the mess that Selebi and Klemeza, Paklani, and all these other, Richard Ndluli, Joey Mabasa, Vinesh Munu, all these criminals, the mess they've left the police in is going to take some really good management, some high ethics and hard-working people. Because remember, the policemen on the street, they're lions, but the problem is they're being led by donkeys.
So it's extraordinary. I mean, you hear about Colombia and you've sort of shown how close this is to home for many of us. Hopefully signs that something at least is being done. Thank you very much. A very interesting on-the-record discussion. That was Mandy Weiner, author and News24 investigative journalist, and certified fraud examiner Paul O Sullivan.